I'm muted. Okay, thank you, Aparna, and thank you, Professor Sarkar, for exciting talk. So we'll now move to our last talk in this meeting. So I invite Professor C. Malla Reddy to introduce Professor V. Ramanathan from IIT BHU, Varanasi.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you very much, Vivek. So now the next speaker is V. Ramanathan. He is assistant professor at Department of Chemistry, IIT BHU. He did PhD from IIT Kanpur Chemistry Department. Then he did postdocs in Germany, Switzerland, and South Korea. And then he had a short stay at Sastra University, Tanjavur, Tamil Nadu before joining IIT BHU. So with this, I request Ramanathan to take over.
Thank you, Dr. Malla. At the outset, I place my humble gratitude to have bestowed on me this wonderful opportunity, because not many times we get this, at least I get this opportunity to share a panel with such giants. And it was a delight listening to Professor Sarkar, whom I had known from my IIT Kanpur days, but as a student. So it was indeed a delight listening to him. And of course, all other experts, specialists who had spoken before him. So thank you at the outset. And let me now share the screen and begin my presentation. I hope you're able to see the slides. I'll just go into the
Can you make it
presentation more? Yeah, just a minute. Yep. Being the last speaker has got its own advantage as well as disadvantage, because there is enough chance that many of the earlier speakers would have covered some of the points, although it was mentioned in the email that we need to have as much disjoint in the content as possible, but so be it. So I had chosen specifically to talk about, or rather give an overview for two very specific texts, which are classified in the Tantra period as espoused by Professor Jagtap in the first talk, namely Rasarnava and Rasaratna Samuchaya. So I have planned as an overview and given a background. Again, since many of the things have been covered by several earlier speakers, I will not be dwelling into the details. I will be just giving a Garuda Avalokan of Rasarnava and Rasaratna Samuchaya. These two have taken in pair because the content is more or less the same. That's the reason I've taken them together, and are very specific comments to share on the mercurial aspects and some recent results. So as Professor Jagtap had clearly espoused the different, and Professor Sarkar also, although that you would have noticed that one thing that we all have a lacuna as a national, it's a national lacuna, that when it comes to dates, we have done a very sloppy job. So much so that there are important manuscripts, important paradigms in our own civilization that we have not been able to put a finger on a specific date. Now, whether it has intrinsic research, methodological problem or phenomenological problem or a biased problem, I am not aware of that. But till date, we do not have specific dates for many things. The reason I'm saying it right at the beginning is you take the dates of even Nagarjuna. You can find it in the literature as early as 3rd century BCE or even 8th century CE. So you have an error bar of lasting at least 500 years, plus or minus. Okay, so that's the fate with which we are dealing with our older scripts, and rightly highlighted by Professor Sarkar, what we mean by ancient. Am I audible? There is some internet problem.
You are audible, but your voice is breaking a little bit.
Okay, I'll try to repeat. I said that the date of Nagarjuna is very flimsy. It ranges all the way for around 1000 years. So the error bar is quite huge. So that's the premise with which we have to look at all the dates. Although there are some aspects where
I think Ramanathan lost the contact.
I think we lost him.
Yeah.
Maybe he will rejoin. Hopefully.
Yeah, let's wait for him.
No, I see him. I see him. Ramanathan, are you there?
Oh, I think we lost him.
He's online, but I think his video is. I see
Yeah,
him logged in.
we will come back.
Yeah. I see.
Am I audible now?
Oh, yes. Hello.
Yes.
Hello,
Yes.
Ramanathan.
So, Ramanathan, can you hear us? Hello? No, I think he has a problem, connection.
He's trying to change his network connection, and hopefully it will be okay.
Okay. Yeah.
For a minute.
Unexpected break.
Yeah. Yeah, so everyone is asking about the video recording. So we will be uploading the video recording after a few days. First, we will show it to the speaker, and if they have no objection, we will upload it on YouTube, and we will write you the email to everyone and send the links to all the attendees and also those who never attended. So, Professor, is he here? No.
So he's connected with one device, I can see.
Yes.
But I think he's.
So, Professor Sarkar, are you there? No, he's not, because there's a question by.
I'm here. I was quietly listening everything. Yeah.
No, so there is a, since we are waiting for Ramanathan, there is a question for you from Dr. Vivek Datar, where he says one can see the fission products. One can, even today, the long-lived fission product can be seen, and that can then tell us whether there was some nuclear knowledge in the ancient chemistry. So he made that comment. I think Dr. Datar is from BARC and TIF.
Yeah. Should I?
Yeah. If you have
Yeah.
any comment, yeah.
The specifically that I said that when excavation in some site they could get the proof of the skeleton which is not from a war. Entire thing was completely frozen as such. No animal approached that site. Some of the walls are completely fused with high temperature that we can make it. Calcined, that is completely. So when they were trying to analyze this thing, they could find it's a high radioactive place. And from the government of India, it is in Rajasthan, and the government of India said that no, close the site and come out, because that would be the radiation problem. And as we know, that it requires special zeal and other things to go, and then yes, but people can do that. I'm very happy if they can go and they can try to find out that what is this, and then they can find out the decay time and all this thing, that when actually it happened. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
He should go that. Yeah, he should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for.
We are extremely thankful to Professor Jagtap because he has been silently replying to many of the questions. Which
Yes, yes.
has been asking.
Yeah, since I think Professor Husur, you also have lots of questions in the QA box. If you want to reply, you can reply by writing the replies. Like you can see the question and type answer, and you can reply. Same for Professor Sarkar. There are lots of questions.
Oh, I see. So I should
Yeah.
go into.
You can click to the QA box and then you see the questions. And there are several regarding the Ayurveda, and I think yes, Professor Jagtap answered several. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Jagtap.
In fact, there is an answer which I particularly like, which was Jagtap wrote to one of the participants, saying that the problem with us is that we want to become westernized rather than modernized. That's a $1 million point.
So there are also questions. Participants raise the hand. So should we allow them to talk?
Yes, because Ramanathan will need 1 or 2 more minutes to reconnect. So we can, if someone wants to talk, they can raise the hand and then we can activate their audio.
There are 3 people.
And make it more interactive. But I don't know whether these hands are really raised one. Yeah, Professor Datar wants to say something. Yes, Dr. Datar, I activated your, you can speak now.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
This is directed to Professor Sarkar. This is just a continuation of my question. Namely, where is this site and what is the high level of radioactivity that has been measured and by whom has this been measured?
Yeah, the radioactivity they reported is 50 times than normal.
Okay.
And the site is somewhere in Rajasthan near Thar Desert.
But it's not connected with our atomic explosions,
write to me,
right?
I can look.
Yeah, maybe I'll write to you. Maybe that's because that requires.
Yeah, they feel that there may be some atomic explosion. Yeah.
I see. Because there is, incidentally, a natural nuclear reactor that is known in Oklo, but that is a few million years ago. Oh, sorry. I think a few 100 million years ago.
Yeah. It is not that old, but one can trace it.
Yeah. No, this is of course
anyway,
much.
let's come.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Datar. So I think Dr. V. Ramanathan is here. So I think he can continue now.
I'm really sorry about the goof up. I just continue. So yes, I was talking about the date.
Can
you do the slideshow, please?
Yeah. So there are, as also showed by Professor Jagtap, there are various texts written during the Tantric period, and interestingly, Professor Jagtap had commented on the Yashodhara. Yashodhara was one of the princes of Gujarat in the 13th or 14th century. And in Rasa Prakasha Sudhakara, he clearly says that all these things are not just axiomatic or something like Kapola Kalpit. It is done by experiment and proved. So that is something we see there. And it is not unique to that, although it is not explicitly stated, but the language with which these texts are written is quite inherent. Those who mentioned Vedic nations, just one comment I wanted to make is that the Chinese historically have retained this intonation in their language. Because today, if we say ni hao, there's a difference in the tonal variation. Those of you who are musically trained will be able to identify. So somehow the Vedic Sanskrit had this intonation in it, namely Swarita, Udata, Anudata, and Dirgha Swarita, which when put on the printing had this upper stroke and bottom lines. So this was the one that also showed by earlier speakers that the knowledge of the metals right from the Vedic age. Here one caution I would like to say about the terminological variations, because one equally important metallurgist of the lore almost 100 years back, Panchanand Niyogi, in his monograph, which 2 very brilliant monographs on copper and iron, he has interpreted this Hiranya and Aya in a different way. And his student, P. Ray, he has carried forward that interpretation. And so in literature, we find this Hiranya being interpreted as silver and Hiranya being interpreted as gold in an interchanging way. So this also calls for, as Professor Sharda Srinivasan had also mentioned, that we look at the words in the context. Like Karpura, she gave an example. So that is the standardization of the terminology is something that we need to work very consciously, because in our texts there are some lacunae, and the usual suspects who would like to deride our tradition would use a straw man's argument and highlight these lacunae in order to deride the entire thing. Rasaranava, it's a critical edition by P.C. Ray and Harish Chandra Kaviratna, and it was published within 1908 and 1910. It's a rare manuscript. At the time when he ventured, P.C. Ray, it's in his own word, that he could found it only in two different libraries, namely Raghunath Library in Kashmir and the Oriental Manuscript Library in Madras, which is Adyar. To note, where is Kashmir and where is Madras? So there is some kind of a transmission or some kind of a pan-Indic awareness, pan-Indic transmission of knowledge, even in the written form, way back. I mean, we're talking of when? 1,000 years before, or in fact, even more than that. So people who raise the question of lack of proper documentation actually have not looked into the details. Otherwise, there is no chance that Raghunath Library in Kashmir will have a similar manuscript as it is in Madras. So I mean, there are similar such stories in the field of philosophy also, how Ramanuja, who travels all the way from Kanchipuram to Kashmir to refer to some manuscripts. So we have this holistic pan-Indic thing, and many of our historians have either willfully or ignorantly brushed it aside. Later in his venture, Prafulla Chandra Ray encountered manuscripts also in Bikaner in Rajasthan, Deccan, that is the Maharashtra, the Pune side, and the Mysore libraries. There are 18 chapters in it, and as Professor Jagtap had said, it is in the Tantric period that the term rasa gets a very special connotation because the rasa was talked about by Professor Sarkar, Professor Sharda, Professor Jagtap, and having different connotations. But it gets the connotation of mercury more so in the slightly before even the Tantric period. And by the way, this Nagarjuna is the same. Many historians have doubted whether he's the same Nagarjuna who had propounded the Madhyamika school of Buddhism. In fact, there are convincing proofs that he is indeed the same Nagarjuna who had propounded the Madhyamika school of Buddhism as well as written the Rasaratnakara. Why I am saying this is the Tantra aspect is the very unique to both the Hindu laws as well as the Buddhist thing. I'll not get into the details. And the way texts were written also predominantly, be it in the Sanskrit text or equally older script in Tamil, they are like a travelogue or like a dialogue. So in this case, specifically Rasaranava as well as Rasaratna Samuchaya, it's like a dialogue between Bhairava and Parvati. And the first 3 chapters are dedicated to the qualification of a student, teacher qualification, quality of quality, on the quality, so on and so forth. The 4th chapter onwards, the 4th chapter deals with the different yantras, and it is for the first time. Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. And although we have different descriptions in scattered way, Rasaranava collates the different instruments. And in fact, that only the 10th chapter onwards, the processing of mercury starts in Rasaranava. Similarly, Rasaratna Samuchaya is a later work, later in the sense after 100 years of Rasaranava. By the way, Rasaranava's author is not known. Many historians have attributed it to Nagarjuna, but that is not correct. Rasaranava's author is not known. It's by Rasa Samuchaya is by Vagbhata, who the same author who had written Ashtanga Hridaya, quoted by Professor Hosur. And this is Rasaratna Samuchaya is a compilation related to preparation and properties of drugs of mineral and metallic origin. So one distinction between Rasaranava and Rasaratna Samuchaya is that RRS is more explicit on the medicinal aspect of these metallic drugs. See, the Ayurvedic period or the healing period, the medicinal age starts, as told by earlier also, at 4th century or even before that. So there are 3 types of Aushadhi which is classified both in Ayurveda as well as Siddha. By the way, the term Siddha, which is now attributed to the medicinal practice of Tamil Nadu, it's a very recent term, and as recent as a 20th century term. And somewhere I read, I'm not able to point my finger confidently, that when Ayush was being formed, they wanted to invent this word to highlight the north-south further. Otherwise, it's like the way I look at it, my readings reveal that it's like the similar kind of a scientific concept, but documented in different language. So both in Tamil as well as in Sanskrit, you have three different medicines which are called Daivika, Manushya and Asurika. So the ones which are purely herbal medicine, they are classified under the Daivika. That is, you bring about changes which are not perturbing your internal system very much. Then come herbometallic drugs. And there is a lot of research in the last few years whether these herbometallic drugs are really organometallic complexes, or because the toxicity of the metals have to be reduced, so on and so forth. But herbometallic drugs are the second layer of defense. And finally comes the metallic drugs, which is in fact more explicitly seen in Siddha literature than in the Ayurvedic literature. So this Rasaratna Samuchaya contains 3,871 verses distributed in 30 chapters. And the first chapter, of course, Vagbhata reveres all the 27 gurus before him, and he considers Nagarjuna to be the most supreme of the Rasa Shastrajna. That's what the term he uses there. And it encompasses 960 formulations in Rasaratna Samuchaya. And it's a compendium of the knowledge that had existed until 13th century. And he means no words to attribute citations to all his previous works. So this also rings us a bell that we did have a Lekhana Paddhati. In fact, traditional texts had the Anubandha Chatushtaya in the beginning, which is something like our abstract of the modern paper, and it had the tradition of citing previous literature. And there are explicit verses which says that if you do not cite a previous work, even by ignorance, your work will not stand the test of time. So we have explicit evidences for such writing techniques, writing styles, which is much close to what we are currently following when we have scientific communication. Chapter 9 provides information on 31 different instruments required in pharmacy based on the description of Somadeva, which is slightly more than what was described in Rasarnava. And chapter 10 exclusively describes about 17 different types of crucibles, about some of which about which Professor Sharda had mentioned in her talk. And interestingly, it also talks about a puta. Puta is also close to furnace, but in a traditional terminology, koshti is what is referred to as a furnace, and puta also acts somewhat like a furnace, and I'll come to that a little bit later. This is the chapter-wise details. I'll not get into the heart of it. Interestingly, there is one Krishna Rao Bapat, whose commentary of Rasaratna Samuchaya predates Prafulla Chandra Ray's. So this is 1890s. Although I must confess here that I have not personally verified this. I have just got it from this paper, because all the while I was also thinking that P.C. Ray's was the first critical edition of Rasaratna Samuchaya. But then this is even predating that. And it was a hiatus in our tradition of, writing Bhashya, then writing Tika. This was our tradition. But then due to several perturbations in the middle, we did not have that for many of the Tantric texts. And only after Prafulla Chandra Ray's kindling, you can see that there are a lot of interests in this in the last 20th century. This is about the chapter-wise description of Rasarnava. I will not again go into the details of it. Both Rasaratna Samuchaya and Rasarnava talks about different ways of processing, or today what we can call as working with the metals in terms of extracting them from their ore, namely Shvedana, Mardana, Murchana, Uthapana, Patana, Rodana, Niyamana, so on and so forth. So, and very interestingly, the exact similar terminology is what is used even in the Siddha text. And that again goes to the point that there is not much of a difference. Rasashala, which both Rasarnava as well as Rasaratna Samuchaya describes, and Professor Jagtap showed the plan view of this. This is the artistic imagination of it, where the Rasalinga has to be placed, where the yantras have to be placed. That is getting described, and it beautifully, this is coming in the second chapter. In the Rasanava, interestingly, as I said, it's a dialogue. The fourth chapter starts like this: Yantra Mushagni Manani Nagnatva Mantravedyapi Kim Karoti Mahadeva Tanime Vattumarhasi. The purport is, okay, the third chapter is talking about mantra nyasa, about which Mr. Hosur also mentioned that there are certain mantra which has to be accompanied. But here the question is raised, okay, what will I just do by knowing the mantras? What are the experimental methods to proceed? Please let me know. Vaktum arhasi. I'm desiring you to talk about it. Then the answer comes: Rasopara, Lohani, Vasanam, Kanchikam, Vidam, so on and so forth. Dhamano, Loha Yantrani, Khalva Pashana Mardakam. So here he says that using the different yantras, you can do these activities of Shvedana, Mardana, so on and so forth. So a pictorial depiction. Here again, I should put a word of caution that many books, even the two compendium prepared by INSA, one in the 1960s under the, I think, A.K. Bag and Subbarayappa, and later in 2002, these two compendiums by INSA also has got mentions about these, but the terminologies are very different. For instance, even in today's talk, there was a mention of Triyak Patana Yantra for zinc extraction. In different websites, you will see Triyak Patana Yantra is different. This I have taken it from a very nice museum, which is in Calcutta, National Council of Science Museum, and they have very good pictures of it. So the description I have given: Mukhe Triyak Krute Bhande Rasam Sutrena Limbitam Tam Khedayet Talagatam Dola Yantramiti Smritam. So this is talking about the Dola Yantra, where essentially you have something hanging inside the inverted pot, which is on a different pot, which is heated from the bottom, and this bottom pot will have a lot of herbal extracts. So you infuse this content, which is shown in yellow here, with all the herbal extracts, and as a consequence of this, there are certain ores, or there are certain processes which culminates in its ending through this process. So similarly, you have this Shvedani Yantra. I will not describe, but then I will show you quickly. So, and this is the Patana Yantra, which is again for extract or those substances which are sublimating, that shows a phase transition from solid to gas directly without going through the liquid phase. This is the Patani Yantra, which is like a normal distillation apparatus, and to this day, this has survived in various wards. And if you go to Jaunpur, which is quite close by Varanasi, you can still see this huge vats having the perfume extraction. Again here, without any offense or without any bias, I would like to say that the history of perfumery is always traced with the Mughal. But then we have the continuation of these kind of yantras being used even 500, 600 years before the Mughal had even come. So either it is like a willful changing, or due to ignorance, I am not aware, I have no comments on that. So this Triyak Patana Yantram, which is like a normal distillation apparatus, so here you can see that the bigger vat which is inside the ground has a vent, and it goes to another pot which is immersion water. So that does the job. So again, it's the Koshti Yantra. Koshti Yantra is the yantra which is used for extracting the zinc from calamine. And as Professor Sharda rightly mentioned, it's very tricky to work with zinc because of its physical properties. And the fact that our ancients could achieve it with aplomb goes a lot to say our achievement. Because even until, say, 16th century, Europeans identified it as a bastard metal, and they didn't even know how to work with zinc. And of course, this is the method. It's like a very interesting thing that you have a bellow, you have this getting heated, and then there is a, when the zinc kind of sublimates, you invert it, and then immediately you seal it. So the zinc kind of gets cold. Once it vaporizes, the zinc over vaporizes, the liquid, the solid zinc actually comes out. And this is achievable only through this Koshti Yantra. And it's done in a closed system. See, today in thermodynamics, we may use the terminology of closed, open, and isolated. But then these are the practical way by which they could achieve, and they did things in a very efficient way. Rasaratna Samuchaya identifies two kinds of zinc, Dardura and Karaveldaka. whereas Rasaranava identifies 3, Mrittika, Gudabha and Pashanabandha. So here there are discussions whether they confuse between zinc and zinc oxide. Because if you don't do it in a closed thing, and even if you do it in a closed thing, there's enough possibility that it can get immediately. So that is something because zinc or zinc oxide. This was also quoted by Professor Jagtap. Avartamane Kanake Pita, Tare Sita Prabha, Shulve Nila Nibha Ikshne, Krishna Vana Sureshwari. So he's addressing his Parvati as Sureshwari, and this talks about the flame test that you introduce different metals, what kind of colors it will impart to the flame. Gold will emit like a yellow. Shulva is here, this copper, and that emits a blue flame, so on and so forth. Vanga, when it comes to, there is a confusion in the literature whether Vanga is tin or lead, because that's again many people, many take it as but see the way they have described Vange Jwala Kapota Abha. Kapota is a pigeon, so it says that when you introduce this Vanga to the flame, it will emit the color that will resemble the neck of a pigeon. Like so on and so forth, this kind of very vivid description that they gave. And similarly, ISA Kapila Prabha. ISA is like iron, and when you introduce iron to the flame, it emits color like that resembles the color of Kapila. Kapila is like the ghee cow that we have indigenous to our country. Then the Rasaranava also gives the test of purity of metal. Nabispulingo nachabudbudascha Yadana rekha patalam na shabda mushagatam ratna samam sthiram cha tadavi shuddham avadanti loha is that which when melted in a crucible does not give any spark or bubbles, nor spurts, or nor emits any sound, nor shows any line on the surface, and it is tranquil like a gem. Pinakam durduram nagam vanjam chabram chaturvidham. This is just one illustrative example to show you how different chapters, they adopt a similar style of first listing out what are the different types of this particular, in this case, they are talking about Abhra. Abhra is mica. Mica is nothing but a polysilicate. And they are, so the style or template is the same. They have first diverse listing of all the different types, how to identify them, how to purify them, how to work with them to transmute them into a different, when I say transmute, not to go to transmute in the sense how to convert them into a pharmaceutical formulation. Then similarly, the different kind of salts, Samudram, Saindhavam, Chulika, Lavanam, Sauvarchala, Kancha, and Lavana Pancha Kirtika. Like that, I mean, in the 18 chapters, you'll have, as I said, the template is the same both in Rasaranava and Rasaratna Samuchaya, where they will list out all the things of what they are describing, and so on and so forth. This is again the same about, this is Kanta. Kanta is one kind of an iron, and it also says that how one thing is Uttamam, Karshakam, Devi, Dravakam, Chottamottamam. You have 3 types, and which type is better in terms of the content of metal in them, so on and so forth. So they had quantitative information as well. This is about copper pyrites, different kind of ores of copper. So Makshika, and how to process them, how to extract copper from them. Okay, I will not get into this detail. Okay. So here, this is my A.K. Biswas, former professor in IIT Kanpur. And I am fond of showing this because when I showed the Makshika thing, the procedure were described for making metal from Makshika, Vimala and Sasyaka, 3 different types of copper ores. The first 2 being copper pyrites and the third being copper sulfate. And they were conclusively coming to the point that all these 3 after processing, they resulted in the identical product, which is Tamra or the copper. And this was observation made centuries before the discovery of elements or the Daltonian chemistry that we are aware of. Okay, so, and this was, of course, these Jawar mines, Professor Sharda had dealt exceedingly well in that. I will not get into it. This is about different metals, just very briefly, how they define silver and how processing of silver. Shuklancha Tarakrishnamcha Vividham Rajatam Priye Gurusnigdham Mrudushvetam Taramuttama Mishyate. The colors of different types of silver, which is heavier, which is lighter, which is having some kind of a odor in it, so on and so forth. Similar for copper, for iron, for tin. Then this is where, again quoted by Professor Jagtap, and I would like to repeat it because it is also one of my favorite verses. But the important thing I would like to draw your attention is the top one also I have taken it from the critical edition by P.C. Ray. And the bottom one also I have taken it from the translation by P.C. Ray. And somehow the numbers of the verses are completely wrong. Whereas this is 97, he takes it as 89 and 90, and same thing is carried forward by Viswas also in 89 and 90. So this kind of also wrong attribution to shloka numbers are there in the literature. One has to keenly surf through it. So here it says Suvarnam Rajatam Tamram Tikshnam Mangam Bhujangamam Lohantu Shadvidam Tacha Yatha Purvam Tad Akshayam. The reactivity or the resistance of corrosion is arranged in this manner. Suvarna, gold, silver, copper. This is Tikshnam is iron, Mangam is tin, Bhujanga is lead. So then modern knowledge, we know that someone have got it wrong here, and perhaps both in the Rasartha Samuchaya also it's carried forward. Today we know that, of course, gold, silver, copper is arranged in the right manner, but after that comes lead and then iron. So this is our modern knowledge, but then in this Rasaranava as well as in Rasartha Samuchaya, the reactivity or the resistance to corrosion is slightly given in a different way. Here about the aspects of mercury. Alchemy is what Professor Jagtap had briefly touched upon, because that's how the European tradition of alchemist, very famous discovery of phosphorus, you know, when the pursuit of getting the gold, how even the phosphorus was, glowing phosphorus was discovered. That's how the Europeans' tradition of alchemy is there. But similar, when we have our historians of science, whether it is written by our own Indians or by Europeans, they have this epistemological carry forward from the way they have looked at European history. But then, if you clearly look at our text, Rasa Siddhe Purahema Gunja Matram Dine Dine Bhakshaye Deha Siddhartham Rasa Siddhi Prajayate. This talks the entire thing, whether it starts from Sushruta Samhita, Charaka, or the Tantric period, or even the iatrochemical period. It's to attain immortality in the body, because our philosophy says, Deho Devalayat Prokto Jivo Deva Sanatana. It is our foremost duty to maintain the body in a very healthy manner. It is one of our primary duties. And there are aspects which will help in maintaining this body, and that was engineered, I would say, by all our previous intellectuals. So there is nowhere, and as Professor rightly pointed out before, that certain terminologies like the gold, it is not like converting zinc to gold. It is like becoming brass, which is having the equal luster of gold. So sometimes when we do not have the context, when we do not have the right interpretation, we can get misled. So here we see that Tilamatram Rasam Devi Brahma Yurdasha Jivati Yakmatram Rasam Devi Vishnu Kotim Sa Jivati. It just says that if you take just Tilamatram of this processed mercury, you will have a very long life like Brahmayu. Now what is Brahmayu? I will not get into. Yak matram, this again a measure of all this quantity. Gunja, Masha. So these, at least Gunja and Masha were in use in the last 50 years. Now we don't hear of the terms Gunja and Masha in terms of that we were having. So this is just to convincingly prove or impress upon you that it is for attaining immortality in terms of our health, and not for looking for a philosopher's stone, or that what is that called, Midas touch. You know, we touch everything and that becomes a stone, that becomes gold. Here again, rasasya lakshanam kimva rasa karma cha kodrusham tatra janami devesha vaktum rasi tatvata. In chapter 10, as I said, it starts about mercury, but you listen to the questioner asks about, tell me about the different properties or different types of rasa. Then that is where the reply comes. Prage vokta rasotpatis stalakshana mata shruna sahasrani ayutani arbudani cha. Ayuta is 1 million, arbuda is 1 million. So he says, Shakyate namaya vaktum sankshepat kathyate shrunu. I cannot list out the different formulations, different names which run into millions and billions for mercurial compounds. Rather, I would tell it to you in a very brief way. So look at the, either you say it like what you Atishayokti or hyperbole, you say that, or you say that he's confessing very honestly about his incapacity to list out all. That I leave to the reader's interpretation. This is the way different how you process mercury, Shvedana, Mardana, like you say the Mardanat, then Charana, then Balam, Jarana, how the different processes happen to mercury. Now, the Puta, this is very interesting aspect which goes in detail about both in Rasaratna Samuchaya and Rasaranava. There are different types of Puta, as a few have listed it here: Mahaputa, Gajaputa, Varahaputa, Kukkuta Puta, so on and so forth. And each one of them have got different kind of temperature which was achieved. And they had different dimensions, they are all well documented. And how many cow dung cakes, the dimension of the cow dung cakes is mentioned in some, or the weight of the cow dung cakes is mentioned. So there is no ambiguity here. And there are modern examples also which have used Putas and have recorded this kind of temps. And I think the seventh chapter of Rasaratna Samuchaya, which Professor Jagtap had also mentioned, is qualification. Those who are truthful, free from temptations, given to Chivas, Samanas, self-control, and used to live upon proper diet and regimen, such are to be engaged in performing chemical operations. So, and the previous sentence, first sentence I have not translated. Tat aushadhanam ajnaha shuchayo vanchanonjitaha nana vishaya bhashajnat ste mata bheshaja hruto. How he should know different languages, different herbs, so on and so forth. Again, this shloka, nasoasti loha matango yamna gandhaka kesari nihantya gandhamatrena yadva makshika kesari. One of my again favorite shlokas, because it is believed in our traditional imagery that elephant can be attacked only by a lion, and that too if the lion approaches the elephant from backside. That's how the lion establishes its prowess as a king of jungle, only by attacking an elephant, that too only from backside. And there are different poetic imageries about it, I will not get into. So here, that similar kind of a poetic imagery, the author of Rasaranava uses, Naso asti loha matango, there exists no metal of an elephant that cannot be subdued by these lion of a kesari, a lion of a sulfur. So talking about the sulfur, one point in passing I need to mention, its names are Gandhaka, its name is Shulvari, and the Shulvari is also cognate, and that's how the term, Professor Shantanu Bhattacharya beautifully mentioned about the origins of certain words like sugar coming from Zucker in German, and then from Shakkar in Urdu or Persian to Sharkara in Sanskrit. And actually it traces back to Tamil, Chakkarai. It is Chakka, it's like taking the extract, but that is a different issue. So the Shulvari, Shulvasya Arihi, the enemy of copper, because copper reacts very easily with sulfur, or sulfur attacks copper very easily. That's why the term of sulfur itself is referred to as a Shulvari. And that's how the Shulvari term gets transported even in today usage called sulfur. And we had a long tradition, and this is a specific example I'm giving from South, where metals were used, and even to this day this is being used in the North India. At least the metal aspect of it has relatively got reduced, but it is not so in the South. And this very famous temple on the hilltop in Payani, where it is made of Navapashana. Pashana is like a poison, and so if you're interested can have a look at it. Why I'm showing this is, of course, this was part of my work, which I'll quickly skip. I wanted to show you very briefly that how the different processes mentioned are actually reproducible even today. So this was from my group, where we had done adopting certain procedures and getting the kind of analyzing them with modern spectroscopic analysis as well. So this was about the Puta that was talked about, how you construct the Puta, how you kind of process with it. And so this was a temperature profile that we had measured, but then I will not get into the details. And the pharmacovigilance part, many people again ridicule that we do not have proper documentation or proper testing. That is not correct, because every medicine, be it in Ayurveda or metallic drugs or Siddha, has got very specific tests that it has to pass through. So here, this is one such thing. I will again skip the details of it. And then how we characterized it and how they are clearly seen as nanomaterials of, that we found it as a core shell nanomaterial, where you have iron oxide, iron core with a polysilicate shell. And interestingly, polysilicate shell helps in ingestion of this drug inside the body. I will skip all this. The mercury and sulfide, Rasasindura, that is what is referred to as, and recently Professor Subhash Lakhotia has been doing a lot of work. But then one important thing is, this is a very famous paper by their group in collaboration with the MS Valiatan. They had prepared Rasasindura, and then they had tested in the Drosophila, and they had found very interesting results. But in my interaction with him, when I asked, did you do it, when you do it as a control, where you can buy, say, mercuric sulfide from Sigma Aldrich or say Merck, and try with that. Unfortunately, the study did not look into that aspect, but we had done it with the iron oxide, magnetite. We had done the animal study even with the magnetite, and we did see market difference. So there is still open challenge to completely characterize the material that is formed at the end of all the processes that are described in these Tantra texts. On the mercury aspect, if you look at it, Parselius is pioneered for use of mercury in the very early on, 15th century. And by the way, India does not have any deposits of mercury. It has always been through trade with China or with some other part of the world that they have got mercury. But still, our obsession with mercury was too high. That's again a paradoxical thing. Three-humor theory, I'll not get into that. So there were two groups, pro-mercurialist and anti-mercurialist. If you go into these details, it's very interesting to see that how they had attacked the usage of mercury and against it. Why? Because it has got to do with the discovery of antibiotics that happened around the Second World War, close to that. So there is a big shift. There's a lobby of who were earlier pro-mercurialist, they became anti-mercurialist, and vice versa. So the take-home message I'm trying to give here is, the use of mercury has been not just unique to India alone, as from a medicinal point of view. It had, before the discovery of penicillin as an antibiotic, the first line of target defense that the doctors used to prescribe in Europe also was just mercury, without any processing or anything. Whereas in our tradition, it was like a processed or the pharmaceutical aspect of mercury. And of course, we know the post-antibiotic era, what kind of a problem we are facing. That, of course, this was a few years back, that the post-antibiotic era, we all know about the antimicrobial resistance and the havoc that this antibiotic has actually caused, not just in human beings, but also in livestock. And it has penetrated in different walks of life. So I pose it as a question that could very serious active resurgence of some of the metallic drugs that our tradition boasts is proud of, can it be revived? So, and this is my last slide. Today being the birthday of C.V. Raman, I cannot but attribute or pay this homage to him. And very interestingly, when he was in Cambridge, he had an interaction with Ernst Rutherford, the famous Rutherford of gold foil experiment. And Raman toured around Cambridge and said, it seems to me Cambridge is a place for play and not for study, because Raman found that people are engaged in all kind of tomfoolery. To which Rutherford immediately said, we do not try to grow bookworms here. We train men who can govern empire. And Raman, in his convocation speech at BHU in 1926, goes on and says, what is the use of these bookworm? Because bookworm just destroys the pages of the book. Rather, what we need is people who can assimilate. And as Professor Ashutosh Sharma said, we need to be confident, and that pride also has to come with this kind of confidence about our own past, yet in a very diligent and in a manner that we can logically communicate it with others. With that, again, put my words of gratitude to Vivek, to Malla Reddy, as well as Ayan Datta, and to have given me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ramanathan, for nicely summarizing and showing the technical details and then the different going through the different chapters wonderfully. Thank you very much. So maybe we can take one or two questions before we close. So there is a question from Devaki Ramanathan. So is Siddha medicine different from Ayurveda?
Well, there are basic phenomenological differences, and it's indeed a matter of research to see when the differences happen, because the three dosha classification of three dosha Vata, Pitta, Kapha is slightly different in Siddha and Ayurveda. Although the medicines are same, the prognostic as well as diagnostic is slightly different.
Yeah. Okay. So there is another question from Debanjana Das. Ayurveda has an underlying principle of vitalism. Is it compatible with the modern understanding of life?
Well, some Professor Hosur beautifully touched upon in his lecture for large length. But if I may add, with due respect to Professor Hosur, that there is an epistemological difference in our approach to health and medicine compared to the European approach to health and medicine. Because any drug trial, how it happens today, we know of the modern practice. And even traditionally, it was only on the cadavers, on the dead bodies. And that epistemological approach, we are following that today, but that is completely different from the way we had. So this vitalism theory was there in the Greek part, but ours, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, is not, in my reading at least, I would say it is not similar to the Greek theory of vitalism. The concept of Vata, Pitta, Kapha is very different, as beautifully espoused by Professor Hosur.
Yeah. So thank you, Ramanathan. So thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, so we probably stop here. And so Vivek, so Ayan is online. Yeah, thank you, Ramanathan. So maybe you can. So Vivek is on phone. So let me check if there are.
Yes, thank you very much, Malla, and thank you, Professor V. Ramanathan, for a very exciting talk. I guess a very good end. Ideally, Professor Ayan Datta is supposed to make a concluding remarks and vote of thanks, but somehow he logged out and he's not able to log in. So Malla, maybe you can take over.
Yeah, sure. So I think so we had a great day. The introduction in the beginning by Professor Ashutosh Sharma and Jayanji from a different perspective. So wonderful insights they gave. So we know the modern chemistry, how modern science works. Most of our students learn it, and then I think it is also important to get a perspective from the ancient times. In those times, they had completely a different challenge. So it was not so easy to get the information from, so then they had to really follow a very, very well organized techniques, passing the knowledge from one to other. But if you look at very closely, and if you look at great scientists of today, so the very systematic approach and also this rigor, so you see in both the sides, and people also worried about how you interpret and who should be doing, and then even the chemistry. In chemistry, it is very important to consider the safety aspects, right? How you design your experiments. And if you go and look at very closely, so all these are, they worried about all these. I think that was very important for them to be ahead of the time in those days, right? So they were much ahead of the rest of the world in most of the aspects, and that contributed to, we also see a correlation with the GDP of the country. So we got a very good perspective overall. And and also we came, and even myself learned a lot that, there is a lot of literature if one is interested to go and look at, but the barrier is the language most of the time. Most of these are written in the different, Sanskrit. So I think that is a barrier, but I think with the new education policy and more holistic approach and, more proactive funding and other things for some of these activities at an appropriate level might be the way forward. So I think the more we learn about these ancient, literature, so I think the more matured we become in terms of dealing with our old literature. So this was, and also there is, as we saw from Ramanathan as well as from Hosur, so we can use the modern techniques and then validate some of those. And then I think that can be a very rich knowledge actually, if we can emulate that. So with this, I think I thank all the speakers and Professor Ashutosh Sharma and Jayanji and Professor Pal and Professor Bhattacharya for being with us. And finally, Aparna for staying all through, and Diksha also, she had to leave in between. But both of you for supporting, and and finally Indian Chemical Association, which also helped, stood with us, and all three organizations of the co-conveners. And with this, I thank everybody who supported us and all the speakers for wonderful lectures. With this, I leave it to Vivek. So I think we can conclude it here.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. I also take this opportunity to thank Professor Jagtap, Professor Shraddha Srinivasan, Professor Hosur, Professor Sarkar, and Professor Ramanathan for exciting talks. I think Professor Ashutosh Sharma started saying that we are all busy writing papers and projects. The one thing that I learned is I had to do one less project and start reading the ancient knowledge that we have. I think that will have a better impact rather than I write one more paper. I'm going to do that for sure. With that, thank you very much, everyone. We are going to sign off. We're going to send you the YouTube.
Thank you, Vivek, Ayan, Mallareddy, for the wonderful session you conducted. It's a great initiative, and it is a great topic, and it is a lesson to learn. And of course, the education policy has to take care of this as well. Yes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the team.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aparna.
Everyone.